A stunning incident at Heathrow Airport has prompted a question few could have anticipated. Was Meghan Markle really apprehended while trying to leave the country with precious gems from the royal collection, pieces steeped in centuries of history and symbolism? The allegations, if true, are staggering. But why would Meghan take such a risk? Was it a misunderstanding or something more deliberate? And how does a certain princess fit into this drama? A princess now breaking a long-held silence to level claims that many find astonishing. Make sure to like and subscribe, plus enable notifications for the latest updates. What began as a faint rumor on an ordinary Tuesday has become one of the most explosive royal scandals in recent memory. News outlets worldwide proclaimed in shock Meghan Markle arrested at Heathrow for stealing priceless crown jewels. Yet the most startling voice hasn't come from tabloids or rumor mills, but from a senior royal figure known for her stoic commitment to the crown. This princess came forward not with mere speculation, but outright allegations, stating that Meghan knowingly took jewels that never belonged to her. This matter transcends any single missing artifact. At its core, it's about disloyalty, inheritance, and a widening chasm within the royal family. The trust that has apparently been broken wasn't just behind palace walls. It stands at the heart of one of the monarchy's most polarizing figures in recent history. Meghan, once heralded as a fresh influence for a traditional institution, now finds herself accused of theft and potentially attempting to flee the country, allegedly caught in the act. To grasp the weight of these charges, consider the traditions of the crown, which for over 1,000 years has safeguarded treasures that signify far more than riches, assets denoting sacrifice, conquest, and unbroken continuity. Access to these jewels, even for senior royals, is meticulously regulated, with every movement logged. That such a revered piece from this collection could go missing, and more disturbingly, be discovered with a former working royal, has rattled the nation. Did Meghan, fusing Tinseltown glamour with a royal pedigree, innocently stumble into a crisis, or was it something far darker? At the heart of this chaos is a princess renowned for her avoidance of publicity and her steadfast devotion to service. So, when she suddenly appeared outside Clarence's house with a prepared statement, it seized the media's attention. She spoke of tradition as more than just pomp. She called it a bond of trust. When asked outright if Meghan was the culprit, her reply was succinct. "You already know the answer." Those words struck like a thunderbolt, stunning observers far beyond the usual frictions that have haunted Meghan's relationship with the royal institution, from the bombshell Oprah interview to her and Harry's retreat from senior duties. Yet nobody could have anticipated a potential crime and betrayal declared not by rumor-hungry tabloids, but by a royal figure herself. According to reports, the theft allegedly transpired at Buckingham Palace. A routine check revealed that a historic brooch, originally worn by Queen Mary and inherited through the generations, was missing from public display. More disturbingly, it had vanished from the royal archives, an area with stringent security accessible only to a handful of staff and upper-tier royals. Initially, administrators chalked it up to a simple clerical error, suspecting the piece might have been temporarily moved for repairs or safekeeping. But deeper inquiry painted another picture. The official log showed an unexplained gap, no documented approval, no formal record of the brooch being removed. Delving into security tapes and conducting interviews brought one name to the surface: Meghan. Word from palace insiders is that Meghan had toured the archival wing during a London trip a few months prior, reportedly to film a documentary segment about royal heritage and her personal journey within the monarchy. She was granted only limited clearance, but the brooch in question was never on the approved list. Investigators later examined video footage showing her emerging with an item resembling the brooch, discreetly wrapped in cloth and slipped into her handbag. Even so, palace officials hesitated. Bringing charges against a royal, former or not, demands delicate handling. They launched a private investigation but refrained from publicizing anything. Meghan had by then flown back to California, and the Crown had no conclusive evidence that she still possessed the artifact. Wishing to avoid a public scandal, the monarchy chose to keep silent. That silence was shattered just last week, when British intelligence received an anonymous lead. The tip stated that Meghan planned a brief trip back to London, followed by a scheduled meeting with a renowned antique dealer in Geneva. They believed she still had the brooch. The response, according to insiders, was precise and methodical. Scotland Yard worked closely with airport authorities, setting up a covert surveillance operation at Heathrow. Meghan arrived quietly, apparently unaware of events unfolding around her. Yet, as she prepared to board her flight home several days later, customs officers stopped her in her tracks. A subsequent search of her luggage revealed the elusive heirloom concealed within a makeup bag, the very brooch taken from the royal archive. She was promptly taken into custody for questioning, and palace aides struggled to keep the story contained while they formulated statements, consulted legal counsel, and alerted the king. Still, by morning, the leaks had begun. Soon enough, the press picked up the thread. Paparazzi swarmed the airport, and Meghan was quietly transferred to a secure holding suite for high-profile detainees. The internet exploded into frenzied debate, and in the midst of the global uproar, a princess broke her typical silence. Despite being advised to remain quiet, she chose otherwise, citing her own history of bearing scandals and supporting her mother throughout decades of royal intrigue. Silence, she decided, was no longer viable. Her statement was concise, forthright, and uncompromising. This family has endured much, but what we must never endure is theft from the heart of our legacy. It wasn't merely a soundbite for hungry tabloids. It carried the weight of historic finality. Public opinion splintered instantly. Meghan's backers labeled it a setup, claiming she had only returned for philanthropic commitments and knew nothing of any missing jewel. Others contended that she had crossed a boundary, brandishing a sense of entitlement that drifted into genuine criminal conduct. But regardless of what people felt, the evidence appeared devastating. Meghan, who has since engaged top-tier legal defense, disputes every allegation, but the damage, both tangible and symbolic, had already been done. In truth, this scandal transcends supermarket headlines. It verges on a constitutional crisis. A high-profile individual, formerly royal, allegedly acts against the crown itself. How will diplomacy handle such a quagmire? Might this lead the monarchy to revise protocols for those who exit the royal circle? And underlying it all, what else could be gone? Now Scotland Yard is fully mobilized, auditing the entire royal collection. Sources say other valuables may have been missing for some time. Is this just one rogue event, or the tip of a deeper breach? In any case, the princess's precise words have once again thrust the royal family into global scrutiny, not with emotional interviews or highly charged tell-all speeches, but through 3 resolute sentences that have the power to reshape Meghan Markle's public image forever. This was just the beginning. Outside, the day seemed ordinary. Gray skies hovering over Windsor, and the steady hum of everyday routine filled Buckingham Palace's centuries-old corridors. Early morning staff performed their duties with practiced grace, arranging floral displays, polishing gallery glass, and bracing for a typically busy schedule. None could have imagined that behind the palace's stolid grandeur, a crisis was brewing, one that would thrust the royal household into immediate damage control mode and compel one of its most dutiful members to speak up in a way she never had before. At precisely 8:46 a.m., the first sign emerged. A junior curator from the Royal Collection Trust stepped into the East Wing, clipboard in hand, visibly tense. She had been charged with updating the visual catalog for an upcoming exhibit on royal heirlooms. Most items were accounted for: ceremonial scepters, Victorian tiaras, and diamond brooches once cherished by Queen Alexandra. But then she reached the cabinet containing Queen Mary's emerald brooch, and her stomach clenched. The piece was missing. The distinctive oval-cut Colombian emerald, framed by cushion-cut diamonds, was simply gone. Thinking at first it might have been relocated for cleaning or photography, she double-checked the ledger. Nothing. Checked again, still nothing. What followed was a series of urgent calls, first to security, then to the archival department, and finally to the royal liaison overseeing exhibits. They all said the same thing. The brooch should be right where it belonged. Within 20 minutes, the head of the royal collection had been summoned. By 10 a.m., 2 members of the Royal Protection Command had arrived quietly at the East Wing. By midday, the palace was on red alert. The alarm wasn't just because something had vanished, but how it disappeared. There was no evidence of forced entry or tampered locks, no alarms set off. The last recorded visit to this restricted area happened weeks prior, and only a few individuals held clearance. Surprisingly, Meghan Markle's name was still on the access list, quietly reinstated after her recent trip to London, supposedly for a cultural documentary on royal traditions. Granted only limited time-bound access, her visit was approved partly out of courtesy to Harry, a gesture meant to ease tensions. That access was intended to be carefully supervised, but evidently it was not enough. It wasn't long before word reached the princess. She had just returned from a charity engagement in Gloucester and was stepping out of her dark green Land Rover, riding boots, wax jacket, when a senior aide delivered the news. She wasted no time speculating. She demanded the access logs, viewed security footage, and confirmed whether her brother was aware. Then she uttered a sentence her aides wouldn't forget. "If this is what I fear it is, silence is not an option, at least not now." For years, the princess had adhered to an unspoken code: protect the crown, protect its legacy, and never add fuel to rumors. But this was different. It wasn't a mere scandal, but a betrayal of ancient tradition. An irreplaceable piece of the monarchy's heritage had vanished, a theft that struck at the monarchy's dignity itself. She spent that afternoon in her private study at St. James's Palace, poring over paperwork, cross-checking notes, and reviewing surveillance tapes. By nightfall, she held a private meeting with King Charles. Already worn down by controversies involving Harry and Meghan, coronation expenses, and public debates over the monarchy's value, Charles wanted no fresh drama, but the princess wouldn't ignore the threat. Meeting his eyes, she said calmly, "We've made excuses for them long enough." Charles didn't argue. He knew she spoke truth. Behind the scenes, palace officials scrambled to handle the crisis. So far, the media hadn't latched onto the story. Only a handful of obscure blogs had hinted at missing royal jewelry. They hoped to quietly recover the brooch and avoid a scene. But that hope evaporated once Scotland Yard stepped in. Labeling the brooch stolen forced a criminal investigation, taking it out of the palace's hands. The next morning, the princess arrived at Clarence House ahead of schedule, clad in black slacks and a navy blouse adorned with a pearl pin that had belonged to the late queen. Her hair was pinned back, her demeanor unreadable, yet her aides sensed a shift. She passed by reporters without a word, took part in a private briefing with palace legal advisors, then emerged carrying a single-page statement. Forgoing a formal press conference, she stood on the steps behind the iron gates and read aloud, "Many of you know me as someone who avoids the camera, not one who courts it. I've been part of this family's history for over 7 decades, witnessing its strengths, challenges, and rebirths. Above all, I've seen the importance of preserving tradition, not for its own sake, but for what it represents. We do not wear our jewels for vanity. We wear them as symbols of collective service, remembrance, and duty. When such symbols are taken without consent, it is not merely a violation of protocol, it is a breach of trust. Then came the unexpected flourish. You may wonder who. I will not say her name, but she knows what she did. The crowd erupted in questions and camera flashes, but the princess simply turned and left. Within the hour, social media blazed with hashtags like Yin's crown jewel scandal and Yuri royal betrayal. Before the day was over, the story trended worldwide. Newsrooms scrambled to verify every crumb, yet no single source had the entire account. Later that night, in the secluded archives of Windsor Castle, another shock broke. An internal review team working overtime to inventory the royal collection discovered that 2 more pieces were missing: a sapphire ring once worn by Princess Margaret in the 60s, and a diamond-studded hairpin originally owned by Queen Charlotte. Neither item could be located. The scope broadened, the suspect list narrowed. Meghan, whose name was already whispered among palace staff, became the focus of a major probe. What had begun as a single missing brooch was evolving into a much bigger saga, a pattern of disappearances, a breach of security, maybe even a conspiracy. The princess kept her silence for the remainder of that evening, sensing that she had said enough for the moment. Her carefully chosen words had struck with precision, but she was far from done. In private, she met King Charles once again, this time with a firmer resolve. "We can't keep shielding her," she reportedly told him. The king, exhausted yet determined, listened and agreed. He had tried to maintain composure for the sake of his mother's legacy, but the situation had evolved. A royal was accused of theft and denounced by his own sister in a public way. There would be no quiet settlement, no discreet burying of this story on some back page. What began as a single missing item had now placed the entire royal family on the brink of a very public reckoning. For once, it wasn't the queen or king taking charge, it was the princess. This was her stand. The crown jewels represent far more than mere adornments. They are the living embodiment of history, forged through empire and warfare, sanctified by centuries of ceremony, and locked away under strict tradition. To the British monarchy, they aren't just heirlooms, but symbols of enduring continuity. Each piece tells tales of conquests, treaties, and dynasties. When one vanishes, it's not merely an act of theft, it's a strike at the monarchy's legacy itself. Early on a Thursday morning, archivists confirmed what everyone had feared, but dared not speak. The brooch was missing, not simply filed in the wrong place, but conclusively gone. The absent piece was the Queen Mary emerald brooch, an especially intricate jewel last seen during a royal charity event at Kensington Palace some 2 years ago. It was worn by Queen Elizabeth II, cherished for both its monetary and symbolic worth. Commissioned by Queen Mary, wife to King George V, in 1910 using emeralds gifted by the Maharaja of Palau, it stood as a testament to colonial history, diplomacy, and bygone gestures of international respect. Stealing it was more than an offense against property. It touched on political, emotional, and cultural facets that shaped the monarchy's image on the world stage. The final recorded location of the brooch was in the high-security vault beneath Windsor Castle, a place guarded by biometric locks and code systems. Each item placed or removed was to be meticulously cataloged, photographed, and logged. Security measures mirrored those of a military base, with monthly reviews of staff rotations. This vault was deemed impregnable. No one expected trouble when the routine quarterly inventory began. A senior conservator, a security officer, and a palace liaison worked methodically down a checklist. Tiaras accounted for, coronation rings, present, the Stuart sapphire, secured. But upon reaching the spot reserved for Queen Mary's emerald brooch, they found only an empty velvet cushion, with the faint impression of where the brooch should have rested. No sign out, no note, no authorized removal. Gradually, panic set in. The audit halted. The vault doors were sealed, calls were placed. By midday, the palace's venerable head of security, who had served 3 generations of royals, was alerted. He entertained the possibility that it had been briefly removed for cleaning or for some event, but the main log showed no such record over the past 6 months. The restoration team was clueless. The photography archive had no recent images, and even the late Queen's personal dresser provided no insights. By the following morning, an emergency review of vault access was mandated. Over the previous half year, exactly 12 people had clearance. 11 could explain their visits, their comings and goings, and each item they handled. The 12th name was Meghan Markle. Although her clearance had technically expired following a short-lived attempt at reconciliation, no one predicted she might misuse it. And yet, that lapsed clearance apparently left a door ajar no one ever expected her to walk through. The records revealed Meghan had accessed the archives 3 months prior on a Monday at 2:17 p.m. She arrived accompanied by a junior staff member, departing an hour later. Security footage caught her holding a silk pouch, which she said was for camera gear. At the time, no one challenged her. Only upon closer review did that pouch appear suspicious, and a possibility emerged. Could the missing brooch have been inside? Inside the vault itself, cameras were limited by long-standing policies intended to preserve royal dignity and discourage any sense of mistrust among the family. However, corridor cameras painted a clearer portrait. Meghan dismissing her escort to film in private, stepping in alone, and accompanied only by an assistant waiting outside, an assistant who has since declined all comment. At first, Meghan wasn't linked to the disappearance. Only after a second wave of auditors cross-checked visitor logs with an updated clearance list did her unaccounted presence that day sound alarms. Her temporary vault access had ended 2 weeks prior, yet due to a clerical oversight, the system had never removed her clearance. Investigators dubbed it a loophole that allowed the crime to slip under the radar. When news reached Princess Anne, she didn't erupt in a visible rage. Instead, she stayed silent for minutes, gazing at a framed photo of Queen Elizabeth II. This wasn't mere protocol gone awry. It felt deeply personal. Anne had been one of the few royals willing to give Meghan the benefit of the doubt, steering clear of palace gossip and preferring to see actions over rumors. But with the evidence piling up, her faith was shattered. The missing brooch carried repercussions extending beyond those palace walls. The royal collection, caretaker of the crown jewels, answers to historians, cultural organizations, and watchdog groups worldwide. The unexplained loss of so important an artifact undermined the monarchy's credibility, prompting whispers in Parliament about enacting public oversight or convening a House of Lords inquiry into the monarchy's security practices for relics. Public trust was at stake. Meanwhile, the palace found itself in a publicity crisis of a magnitude not seen in decades. Should they publicly identify Meghan, thus unleashing a media firestorm, or secretly recover the brooch and hope the matter faded away? But with the involvement of legal authorities, quiet settlements seemed impossible. Princess Anne opted for openness, deciding that years of secrecy and behind-the-scenes maneuvering had only eroded the monarchy's standing. The public, she felt, deserved the truth, especially if the threat to the crown came from within. She gave the palace an ultimatum: retrieve the brooch and disclose the facts within a week, or she herself would make everything known. Then events accelerated unexpectedly. Mere days later, Meghan arrived at Heathrow Airport on her way to Los Angeles with rumors of a Swiss stopover, only to be met by alert security officials. What they found would shake the monarchy to its roots. By the time news of the brooch's disappearance spread among palace staff, speculation was rampant. Fingers pointed toward the royal figure who had long been a source of tension and suspicion: Meghan Markle. Initially admired for her distinctiveness, she had become a lightning rod for criticism, and now the prime suspect in a serious crime. The public recognized her as an actress, a philanthropist, and a critic of antiquated institutions. Yet now another, far more disturbing descriptor loomed over Meghan's name: accused thief. The very notion was startling, given the surroundings: plush, velvet-lined cabinets storing priceless family heirlooms. Even gloved hands typically moved with caution in that part of the palace. When Scotland Yard discovered her name on the access logs for the day the brooch went missing, they didn't rush to judgment, but the evidence was mounting. While the investigators remained measured, neither were they dismissive. Meghan retained her status as the Duchess of Sussex, complete with many entitlements, even after her and Prince Harry's withdrawal from royal duties. Yet no degree of privilege could shield her from scrutiny. Reviewing her visit to the Royal Archive revealed subtle inconsistencies. Meghan claimed she was filming a piece for Symbols of the Crown, a documentary exploring royal heritage. Her request targeted specific historical relics: coronation gloves, Queen Victoria's traveling case, ceremonial robes. Notably absent from that list was the Queen Mary Emerald brooch. Moreover, her entry was contingent on having a senior staff escort. Yet footage showed this chaperone departing less than 10 minutes into Meghan's stay. Reportedly, Meghan wanted a quiet moment to record a personal video about her royal experience. What happened in the remaining 45 minutes is now the subject of international investigation. Authorities discovered that during her unaccompanied time, Meghan accessed a vault area well outside her approved zone. A scan of her badge opened a corridor containing certain crown artifacts seldom put on public display, including the missing brooch. The vault's biometric door code, set to expire once she concluded her visit, had apparently been active just for that session. By the time an audit took place, the code had deactivated, highlighting that it was only live during her arrival. Although the footage was grainy, its implications were concerning. Wearing a cream overcoat and carrying a designer handbag, Meghan was filmed leaving the corridor with what looked like a small satin pouch. Her representatives insisted it held recording equipment and production notes, but its shape and size resembled the protective boxes used for delicate royal jewelry. Palace staff recognized it immediately. Beyond these clues, Meghan's public stance over the past year came under new scrutiny. She had openly discussed her discomfort within the monarchy, her restricted freedoms, and the symbolic suffocation of her role. In a widely heard podcast, she once described royal life as life in a cage of relics, where history outweighed human needs. Words once taken as poetic metaphor were now being reevaluated. Was the missing brooch a gesture of rebellion, or had she knowingly committed a more deliberate act? Reactions varied. Some famous supporters staunchly defended Meghan, labeling the monarchy's accusations a ploy to silence any further revelations. Detractors, however, saw a pattern of hubris. Between the Sussexes' profitable deals and revealing interviews, they viewed this as Meghan's next step in exploiting the institution she'd once joined. This time, however, it was a literal piece of history she'd allegedly taken. Reporters dug in deeper, asking questions that sparked even more speculation. Why did Meghan go to the archive without her film crew? Why was her palace visit unannounced? Why, just a few weeks post-visit, did she cancel an engagement citing personal reasons? Debates on possible motives escalated rapidly. financial profit seemed a slim explanation. By all accounts, Harry and Meghan were not strapped for cash. Their Montecito home boasted sprawling gardens, designer decor, and top-tier security. Nonetheless, recent American court records implied the couple faced looming expenses and unsteady revenue streams. Rumors of a lavish lifestyle straining their funds circulated among palace watchers. Others suspected a more emotional motive. Could this have been a rebellious strike from a woman who felt alienated and disrespected, an emblematic revenge, or a statement after feeling undervalued by the firm? Either possibility had profound implications. Amid these swirling possibilities, one detail was obvious. This went far beyond a single jewel's disappearance. This was about Meghan Markle's place in the ongoing royal narrative, one of disruption, transformation, controversy, and possibly law-breaking. As investigators intensified their work, Scotland Yard asked formally to question her. Her lawyers responded with a concise, forceful statement. The Duchess of Sussex denies any involvement in the royal collection's missing item. She has cooperated fully with the relevant agencies and will continue to do so. All accusations of misconduct are both false and defamatory. But the frenzy didn't slow. The unfolding scandal became global news. Major networks delivered around-the-clock coverage. Analysts dissected how this might shift public empathy, and royal historians mused on how unprecedented these charges really were. Online, conspiracy theories and parodies dominated, overshadowing more nuanced conversations. Throughout the chaos, Meghan remained invisible. She called off her scheduled charity stops, disabled comments on her social media platforms, and retreated from the public eye altogether. Close confidants described her state of mind as shocked, upset, and deeply alarmed. Detractors saw her disappearance as an admission of guilt. Despite her legal team's insistence that she was innocent, new developments fueled suspicion. A Swiss luxury jewelry insider claimed a consultation had been arranged with a client matching Meghan's description, just 2 days after her planned return from London. The client reportedly insisted on secrecy and declined to provide a full written description of the piece. Once the scandal went viral, the jewelry firm canceled the meeting, but the timing and circumstances raised eyebrows. Meanwhile, palace officials felt mounting pressure. In private, Queen Camilla was reported to have wept over the loss of a brooch she'd once worn in tribute to Queen Elizabeth II. Prince William seethed, not only because of the alleged theft itself, but also for the blow it dealt to his family. King Charles, outwardly composed, issued an extraordinary directive calling for total collaboration with investigators, titles notwithstanding. The final revelation came from an unexpected angle: a staffer who accompanied Meghan during her time in the archive. After being interviewed, this aide mentioned something previously unknown. Meghan had lingered, murmuring to herself. When pressed about it, the aide repeated Meghan's words. "They never saw my worth. I'll show them I was worth something." Suddenly, the story moved from legalities into psychological territory. Had Meghan's supposed actions been a cry for validation, a reckless gamble, or a desperate bid for attention from a family she felt had discounted her? With all eyes locked on the next steps, and the monarchy bracing for an unprecedented judgment, one grim possibility hovered. If Meghan Markle truly took the brooch and the crown could prove it, the British monarchy faced a dilemma like none before: how to deal with its own in a scandal of historical magnitude. The royal household had withstood divorces, confessional interviews, financial probes, and tabloid frenzies. But this was different. A precious legacy jewel was gone, and one of their own stood accused. Attention gravitated not to the monarch or his heir, but to the least theatrical figure in the family: Princess Name. Known for avoiding glamour and the spotlight, she quietly outperformed her relatives in public engagements, traveling to out-of-the-way charities, agricultural events, and shipyards, while others basked in red carpet glitz. Her ability to sidestep palace intrigue had earned her a reputation for discipline, honesty, and unswerving loyalty. So, when the Queen Mary emerald brooch vanished and Meghan's name appeared in the access logs, the princess insisted on an immediate, private conference with the head of the Royal Collection Trust. That meeting, held behind closed doors at St. James's Palace with no staff present, focused on one question. Was this negligence, or was it intentional? The tentative conclusion leaned towards something deliberate. Alarmed, the princess formed her own investigation team, not composed of palace PR staff, but archivists, trusted security professionals, and 2 former MI5 operatives quietly engaged for such sensitive internal tasks. Their assignment was to work unobtrusively, reconstructing everything from Meghan's initial request to view the archives, through to the day the brooch was officially reported missing. The princess saw the immense risks. If the brooch was misplaced, calling out Meghan publicly could trigger legal blowback. But if Meghan had taken it, either to keep or to sell, this wasn't just a shameful scandal. It bordered on a modern-day betrayal, an affront to the institution, to history, and to the late Queen's legacy. The level of the princess's involvement startled even senior palace employees. She personally reviewed floor plans, badge logs, and recorded video. She interviewed staff herself, something not done by a senior royal, since Charles demanded facts directly from paparazzi agents in the aftermath of Diana's death. She visited the exact spot in the archive chamber where the brooch once lay on its velvet cushion. She stood there quietly for nearly a minute. When a staffer asked if she was all right, she didn't glance up. "It's not some trinket we misplaced," she said. "Queen Mary gave it to my mother. You don't just lose something like that." Her investigation uncovered even more details. During her visit, Meghan had insisted on reviewing documents from the Royal Jewels Transfer Registry, a log chronicling each piece's origin, current location, and appraised value. The brooch's revaluation had recently been updated to roughly $4 million, making it tempting for anyone seeking a payout in discreet luxury markets. This notion that a historic emblem might be reduced to a price felt like a deep insult to centuries of tradition. Scrutiny also fell on the vault access system. The IT department discovered that Meghan's temporary code should have expired days prior, but someone had overridden that limit. Meghan alone couldn't do that, meaning someone else either did it for her or at her request. Investigators zeroed in on a junior staffer tasked with helping Meghan that day. Young, newly hired, and eager to please, he admitted verifying her code upon her request. While he claimed to assume a higher authority had authorized it, the log showed otherwise. He had manually extended her clearance without a supervisor's knowledge. Unsure whether he erred innocently or colluded, he was promptly placed on leave. The princess then questioned the assistant who waited outside the archive room, a devoted young woman fiercely loyal to Meghan's image. Initially, she refused to cooperate without legal counsel, yet after hours of steady, calm conversation, she admitted that Meghan had told her to erase certain photos taken during the visit. The assistant figured it was for aesthetic reasons, bad lighting or awkward angles, but the timing mirrored Meghan's entrance to and exit from the very corridor where the brooch was stored. The princess reported her findings to King Charles in a private meeting attended only by the Lord Chamberlain, the palace security chief, and the lead lawyer. Charles, visibly distressed, listened in silence. When it ended, the king paused, and a palace aide present recalled his only response: "Then we can no longer stay silent." However, silence had already been broken elsewhere. Unknown to the palace, a freelance journalist had caught wind of the investigation. A disgruntled former staff member had leaked parts of the story to a foreign tabloid, hinting that a senior royal was involved in a jewel scandal. No names were mentioned, but the timing and context made the implications clear. Within hours, media speculation exploded. Twitter threads filled with accusations, guesses, and pixelated images of Meghan at past royal events wearing unfamiliar brooches. The palace faced two choices: issue a statement confirming some details, or let the media spin their own narratives and lose control of the story. The decision was made for them. The princess drafted a statement, direct, clear, but careful not to name anyone. It acknowledged that a valuable item was missing, internal protocols had been breached, and an inquiry was ongoing. Most importantly, it emphasized the importance of protecting the integrity of royal history. But she added something that stunned everyone when read aloud. "I will not be silent when the legacy of our past is compromised by deceit. No matter how uncomfortable the truth may be, we owe it to the people, the crown, and those who came before us to safeguard what cannot be replaced." It wasn't just a press release. It was a warning. Within hours, the word spread worldwide. Analysts called it unprecedented. Observers admired her composure and determination. Supporters praised her as a defender of royal customs, while critics saw her actions as disguised attacks. Yet one fact stood out. She had entered the fray with precise and calculated moves. Behind closed doors, some within the royal circle voiced worries. Was she being too daring? Could this backfire and portray the monarchy as fractured? But she remained steadfast. "This isn't about appearances," she told a trusted aide. "It's about principles, and we've already compromised too many of those." Meanwhile, the internal inquiry reached a critical stage. An expert in artifact forensics was called to inspect the empty brooch display. Velvet fibers from the brooch were discovered in a drawer Meghan had accessed, and a tiny clasp screw matching the brooch's setting was found inside the archival desk lining. It was clear the brooch had been handled, and if not by staff, the possibilities were limited. "Now we wait for her to come back," she'd said. But fate took a more urgent turn. Only a few days later, at Heathrow Airport, just as Meghan was poised to leave the UK once more, officials intercepted her. They stopped, questioned, and searched her, uncovering something hidden inside a designer makeup pouch tucked beneath silk scarves. That discovery shattered whatever defenses she had left. The morning Meghan Markle arrived at Heathrow began without a whisper of turmoil. Her travel routine resembled most VIP visits: protective security, discreet transfers, and a quick route through exclusive terminals meant for diplomats and royals. Despite the swirling controversies, she still carried herself with a certain privilege, albeit more cautiously than before. Her team worked diligently to keep this trip under the radar. No scheduled appearances, no philanthropic engagements, not a single press release. She intended to leave London quietly. But unbeknownst to Meghan, Scotland Yard's Royal and Specialist Protection Division had spent the past 24 hours tracking her every movement. An international tip-off claimed that she intended to remove a valuable royal item from the country. Initially skeptical, officials grew alarmed when they compared her itinerary and palace access logs. Her plan was straightforward: a mid-morning flight from Heathrow's private suite to Los Angeles, rumored to include a layover in Geneva. That Geneva stopover sent warning signals, as the city is a hub for discreet jewelry appraisals, raising concerns that the missing brooch might be slated for covert evaluation or sale. Determined to avoid a dramatic public scene, authorities prepared for a quiet interception prior to boarding, hoping to verify the intel, recover the item, and preempt a potentially historic theft of royal property. Meghan arrived at the private terminal at approximately 9:12 a.m., accompanied by her assistant and personal driver. She wore subdued tones, a gray coat over a beige blouse, hair pulled back low, and seemed composed, unsuspecting. Staff recognized her, but had been coached to remain subtle. Two plainclothes officers from the Specialist Protection Unit mingled among the travel facilitators. As Meghan made her way to the reserved lounge, a woman appearing to be an airport security supervisor politely asked to inspect her luggage. Meghan briefly appeared puzzled, but did not protest. Her assistant objected, mentioning a tight timetable, but the official presented a laminated clearance for a supplementary security check stamped by the Transport Department and Royal Protection Unit. Another officer then directed Meghan to a private lounge area for a more thorough look. Her assistant looked on with alarm, and Meghan's eyes narrowed, though she stayed composed. Surveillance cameras in the secure terminal captured the scene without audio. Once inside, the atmosphere grew tense. Two senior figures from the Crown Intelligence Liaison Office took charge. One placed a black folder on the table and identified himself. "We need to review your carry-on and checked bags," he announced. Meghan's tone was calm but unyielding. "On what grounds?" "We have credible evidence that you possess property belonging to the royal collection," the official said. "This affects national interests. Cooperation will speed up the process." Her expression didn't change. She folded her arms and said, "Search them all. You'll find nothing." The luggage was brought forward. Her assistant waited outside, visibly on edge. A female officer trained in diplomatic security skillfully unzipped Meghan's primary suitcase, finding mainly high-end apparel, toiletries, skincare products, a tablet, and a folder marked Archewell Docks Private. But when she opened the secondary carry-on, an elegant brown leather bag, the dynamic shifted. Nestled under makeup items and between a scarf and a small jewelry case of costume pieces lay a cloth-wrapped parcel. Carefully unwrapping it, the officer revealed a small, velvet-lined, hinged box with a distinctly royal style. Inside it was the Queen Mary emerald brooch. Its distinctive emerald sparkled brilliantly under the lounge's bright LED lights, surrounded by a halo of diamonds. For an instant, nobody moved. Meghan stared at the officer holding the case mutely. The silence weighed heavily on everyone present, echoing far beyond that quiet room. One investigator quietly closed the box again and placed it in an evidence container. Meghan's passport was removed from her bag and set on the table. "We need to discuss this in more detail," the lead officer said calmly. "It isn't what you think," Meghan murmured at last. "Then please explain," he replied. "Because from here it appears you were attempting to carry a priceless royal heirloom out of the country. No official declaration, no authorization, no documentation whatsoever." Meghan lowered her gaze, her hand trembling slightly as she toyed with the collar of her blouse. "It's not stolen. The Queen gave me this brooch." Silence gripped the room. The investigator's eyes narrowed. "We have no record of that. No paperwork, no formal statement, no endorsement from the royal collection or Her Majesty's will." "I don't owe anyone an explanation," Meghan said firmly. "It's personal." Outside the makeshift interrogation area, rumors were already flying. A photographer, tipped off by an airport source, managed to snap a shot of Meghan entering a private corridor flanked by two officers. In a matter of minutes, the picture took over the internet. Social media ignited within the hour. Hashtags like #MeghanBroachGate and #Royal Theft dominated global feeds. Meanwhile, word reached Buckingham Palace. A princess in the midst of mourning discussions at Clarence House was discreetly informed. On hearing the news, she leaned back in her chair, shut her eyes, and whispered, "Then it's true." Within half an hour, King Charles received a briefing. He said little, then mandated a complete legal inquiry and immediate forensic verification of the brooch so they could rule out any swap or tampering. Back at Heathrow, Meghan wasn't arrested in the usual sense. Her diplomatic status and the tangled legal questions around her royal title complicated any normal detainment. Instead, she was held for questioning under a formal investigative order and moved to a secure diplomatic holding suite in the terminal. Her assistant was allowed to remain close, but was barred from contacting the media. Meghan made one phone call to her California-based lawyer, who quickly assembled a high-profile legal team set to fly to London. That afternoon, Scotland Yard issued a short statement confirming that a valuable item from the royal collection had been retrieved from a departing passenger now under investigation, and that this artifact would be returned to the crown for authentication. They named no names, but everyone knew. The princess kept silent. She didn't have to say anything more. Reality had vindicated her warning. Thus, within the discreet confines of one of the busiest airports on the planet, behind the facade of privilege and centuries of tradition, Meghan Markle found herself embroiled in a crisis more explosive than any tabloid could ever imagine. As morning faded into afternoon, the hushed hallways of Heathrow's private terminal buzzed with activity beneath a veneer of calm. The discovery of the Queen Mary emerald brooch in Meghan's luggage drew a clear dividing line. A royal figure was no longer just under suspicion. She was now subject to an active investigation for possessing stolen crown property. Still, to officially apprehend a duchess, particularly a former senior royal, on British soil brought diplomatic and constitutional issues well beyond regular law enforcement matters. Within the secured lounge, Meghan sat unmoving. Her lawyer joined via a secure video link, already protesting what he termed an egregious breach of her personal freedoms and dignity. She wasn't handcuffed, nor formally read her rights, but every step taken around her produced the same effect. She was unable to leave, trapped in a high-priority inquiry now supervised by both the Crown Prosecution Service and the Royal Household Legal Office. No one publicly uttered the word arrest, yet behind the scenes, everyone whispered it. Worse still, Meghan's convoluted legal standing only heightened the tension. Though she still held the title of Duchess of Sussex, she was no longer a working royal and had no official diplomatic protections. She was also an American citizen, which exempted her from certain formalities, but not from the reach of British law. Detaining her without a formal warrant, one endorsed at the highest level, threatened a wave of legal retaliation, not just from her counsel, but perhaps from the U.S. State Department if the situation turned political. The path forward felt precarious, like walking a razor's edge. Meanwhile, back at Scotland Yard, officials grappled with an ever-growing mountain of evidence. Files, digital access logs, security camera footage, testimonies from palace staff, and most importantly, the physical brooch itself stood in stark relief. Forensic teams at the palace confirmed the piece's authenticity. The inscription beneath the clasp, visible only under strong magnification, matched archived photos and registry details for the Queen Mary emerald brooch. That confirmation spurred the palace to issue a concise statement. A historical item from the royal collection has been located and retrieved by the appropriate authorities. The matter is now subject to formal review. The royal household will issue no further comment at this time. But it was too late to tame the media furor. Outlets worldwide devoted special coverage, breaking into scheduled programming with urgent updates. Legal experts, royal historians, and culture commentators piled onto every available screen, interpreting and speculating. Why would Meghan do this? How could such an incident occur? They asked, as the public clamored for answers. Some bystanders outside Buckingham Palace called for her immediate expulsion and labeled her a traitor to the crown, while others defended her, insisting she had been set up by rival royals and a hostile press. Inside palace walls, the turmoil was more subdued, but equally intense. Private crisis meetings took place, official statements were meticulously drafted, and emergency plans were devised in case Meghan faced formal charges. Rumors flew about whether her titles might be stripped, how King Charles would respond, and whether any statement from him would suffice. Furious but contained, Charles recognized that his vision of a modern, stable monarchy, an era free from old scandals, had been hijacked by a fresh catastrophe that reopened unsettled rifts. No one was more shaken than Prince Harry. Left behind in California to focus on a veteran's mental health project, he was blindsided by the rumors and then by confirmation of the allegations. Sources say he was incredulous and tried urgently to phone his father, only to receive no response. Attempts to reach the princess were met with stony silence. A single palace intermediary told him that legal procedures were in motion, and open communication could compromise them. Caught between loyalty to Meghan and a dawning realization that the monarchy's patience was exhausted, Harry went silent. Confidants described him as devastated, torn between love for his wife and a grim understanding that this time the crown's anger was not a passing storm. At the airport, Meghan's predicament worsened by the hour. Her lawyers deemed her detainment improper, reiterating her insistence that she carried a personal keepsake bestowed by the Queen. But asked for documentary proof of that gift, they came up empty. No signed letter, no mention in the Queen's will, no official note removing the brooch from the royal inventory. As the brooch's status as a state-held treasure was formally acknowledged, the burden shifted. No longer was she merely a suspect. She was on the brink of becoming a defendant. By late afternoon, after exhaustive internal debate and diplomatic consultation, the Crown issued a conditional detainment order. Instead of any standard holding cell, Meghan was transferred to a highly secure government residence intended for individuals of significant public and legal status during active investigations. Her passports were confiscated on a temporary basis, she was given the right to legal counsel at all times, and she was forbidden from leaving the country. Under cover of dusk, a convoy of black SUVs arrived at Heathrow to drive her away. Though the media caught wind, they couldn't get close enough for direct shots. Only a distant aerial photo captured the movement. That image hit major networks minutes later, unleashing an immediate public reaction. Calls flooded Parliament. Some MPs urged a formal investigation, while others suggested revoking Meghan's titles outright. A special Privy Council meeting was scheduled to discuss the constitutional implications of a royal figure under investigation for theft. Meanwhile, the press descended on Frogmore Cottage and the Montecito estate, searching for a reaction from family or any glimpse of Harry. Within her secure residence, Meghan kept her silence, issuing only one carefully crafted statement through her legal team. I categorically deny any accusations regarding historical items under my care or possession. I have always believed that anything I held was given to me genuinely and with affection. I will vigorously defend my innocence, trusting that the truth will ultimately prevail. Meanwhile, reality beyond those walls was advancing quickly. The Queen Mary Emerald brooch was back in the royal collection, and the princess placed it in the Queen's personal display cabinet inside the white drawing room, tightening security around it. She made no celebratory remarks, releasing only a short note via her private secretary. Royal heirlooms belong to the people, not individuals, and preserving them is not a choice, but an obligation. Her point was clear. This ordeal wasn't about private grievances, but about a transgression against duty, and Meghan had overstepped a boundary. While the nation waited for further action, whether criminal charges, legal hearings, or diplomatic intervention, one fact loomed over everything. Though the apprehension had taken place discreetly at Heathrow, it sent shockwaves through the royal family's narrative. Meghan Markle's detention reverberated worldwide, going well beyond sensational headlines. Within mere hours, the scandal escalated into a cultural debate over power, class, race, and privilege. Online platforms exploded with opinions. Some fiercely defended Meghan, insisting the monarchy had long targeted her unjustly. Others, particularly royal loyalists, demanded her titles be revoked and called for legal consequences. In front of Buckingham Palace, crowds formed. Some voiced their loyalty to protect the crown, while others championed Free Meghan, recalling the turmoil the monarchy hadn't seen since Princess Diana's funeral. Meanwhile, news coverage was relentless, broadcasting every moment of Meghan's Heathrow footage, with commentary examining whether her motives were born of desperation or rebellion. Social media rattled with hashtags and conspiracies, some decrying her as a villain, others denouncing the entire investigation as a smear campaign. Within the palace, the chaos was quieter, but no less intense. Confidential discussions took place, official statements were closely vetted, and what-if scenarios were drawn up in case Meghan was indeed charged. King Charles, outraged yet controlled, recognized that the vision he'd wanted for his reign, modern unity and a chapter free of old feuds, had collapsed under a fresh shock that reopened old wounds. No one was more affected than Prince Harry. Remaining behind in California for a veterans' mental health initiative, he first heard the rumors, then confirmations, about Meghan's alleged wrongdoing. Insiders say he couldn't believe it. He tried to reach his father, but was met with silence. Attempts to contact the princess also yielded no response. Only a brief update arrived from a palace intermediary, explaining that the matter was in legal hands, and open discussion might jeopardize the proceedings. Isolated from his relatives, unsure what to think, Harry remained quiet. Friends say he was crushed, torn between standing by Meghan and conceding that the monarchy had its own limits. Meanwhile, Meghan's situation at the airport deteriorated. Her lawyers termed her detention unwarranted, maintaining she had done nothing criminal and was simply holding a piece personally gifted by the Queen. But when asked for any formal acknowledgement of that gift, they had nothing. No signed letter, no mention in the Queen's will, no log removing the brooch from the royal collection. And with the brooch officially recognized as crown property, the burden shifted dramatically. Meghan was no longer just a person of interest. She was poised to become a defendant. By late afternoon, after significant internal debate and consultations, the Crown authorized a conditional detainment. She would be moved to a secure government facility far from an ordinary jail, but reserved for high-status individuals under investigation.